Alrighty, pushers, welcome back to another episode of Mr. BAP US History. On today's episode, the Second Great Awakening, Religion and Reform, 1800 to 1860. Unjust laws exist. Shall we be content to obey, or shall we endeavor to amend them and obey them until we have succeeded? Or shall we transgress them at once? Under a government which imprisons unjustly, the true place for a just man is also in prison. Henry David Thoreau on Civil Disobedience, 1849. On to the notes. Individual and the ethic of the middle class. Individualism, a characteristic of American identity. People have to fend for themselves with little support from traditional institutions. Liberation of the individual. I march to the beat of a different drum. That's a quote from Henry David Thoreau. American Renaissance, 1820 to 1860. The flourishing of art, literature, and philosophy. The American Renaissance. Transcendentalism, Ralph Waldo Emerson, started as an intellectual movement inspired by European Romanticism. It's the rejection of reason of the Enlightenment, embraced human passion and feelings as the source of all truth and knowledge. Emerson rejected all organized religions, argued that people were trapped by customs, traditions, and institutions. People need to be remade by communing with nature and entering a mystical union with the currents of universal being, i.e., God. Individual self-realization. Ideas spread through the Lyceum movement, 1826, traveling lecture tours. They preached rejection of tradition, practice of self-discipline, and civic responsibility. Believed that the market revolution, work, profit, money, and consumption, debased U.S. spiritual values. Experiment with communal living, for example, Brook Farm, 1841 to 1846. When utopianism did not work, decided to focus on reforming society. The transcendentalism born out of the market revolution. Ralph Waldo Emerson's transcendentalism literary influence. Ralph Waldo Emerson pushes The American Scholar in 1837. Emerson urges Americans to find inspiration for their art in the experiences of the ordinary Americans, i.e., the common man. Seeing the influence of mass democracy and the rise of the common man in literature and art. Henry David Thoreau, famous transcendental author, wrote Walden, or Life in the Woods, 1854, an account of his search for meaning by communing with nature. He was a disciple of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and probably more famous than his inspiration. Embraced individualism and told his readers to avoid unthinking conformity and to peacefully resist unjust laws in his famous essay on civil disobedience. Margaret Fuller, transcendental author that explored the possibilities of freedom for women, wrote Women in the 19th Century in 1844, argued that women deserve psychological and social independence. Walt Whitman, transcendental poet, wrote a collection of poems called Leaves of Grass, 1855, celebrated the individual but also believed that the collective democracy was sacred. Darker Visions. Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Scarlet Letter, 1850, and Herman Melville, Moby Dick, 1851, rejected transcendentals, unfettered egotism, or individuality. In their novels, they warn about the destructive power of individualism on people and society. Rural communalism and other effects of the Second Great Awakening. Utopias, ideal communities set apart for the rest of society, meant to realize spiritual potential, symbols of social protest and experimentation. Common ownership of property, socialism, and unconventional forms of marriage and family life challenge traditional property rights and gender rules. Utopias. Perfect societies. Perfect societies, question mark. Mother Ann and the Shakers, 1784. The United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, Shakers, formed rural utopian societies. Communal ownership of property, no alcohol, no tobacco, no politics, no war, no marriage. They were celibate. Male and female equality, famous for making quality furniture, died out because they relied on conversions and adoptions, and it was a pretty tough life. It was hard recruiting people into all the no's. Fourierism, Albert Brisbane. Socialism was the next step after republicanism, is what Albert argued. Communal ownership of property, male and female equality, a quote, new social order, created short-lived cooperative societies in the Midwest. Onieda, John H. Noyes, perfectionism. He argued that Christ had already returned and people should live in sinless perfection. rejected traditional marriage and called for complex marriages. Oneida, 1848, a perfectionist utopia, became famous for its silverware, but eventually died out as well. The Church of the Latter-day Saints, Mormons. Mormons, religious utopians with conservative social agendas, close-knit community, and patriarchal power, founded by Joseph Smith when he published the Book of Mormon in 1830. Saw himself as a prophet in a sinful, individualistic society, encouraged frugality, hard work, and enterprise, moved west because of persecution, built a city in Illinois, justified polygamy, or having multiple wives, was arrested and then killed by an angry mob in jail in 1844. Brigham Young led the Mormons out of the United States to Salt Lake City, Utah. Moving out west, some Mormons rejected polygamy and stayed in the United States. By blending economic innovation, social conservatism, and hierarchical leadership with a strong missionary impulse, the Mormons survived and grew in numbers. These were all effects of the Second Great Awakening, which in turn grew out of the market revolution and a decline in religious practice, combined with mass democracy and the rise of the common man. Wrapping up our trifecta of antebellum America revolutions. On the next episode, expansion, slavery, and the lead up to the Civil War. Until next time, make sure you like, subscribe, add, and comment. This is Mr. B, AP US History, signing out.